In the name of God, our helper, our rescuer, and our refuge. Amen. Please be seated. In the year 1880, a young man, 17 years of age, first came to the United States from Germany and arrived at Ellis Island. He went back and forth on several voyages in steerage to see his family in Germany, but by 1885, he made the United States his permanent home. It may have something to do because he fell in love with a young woman he met at church here in the States. And she was also from Germany, and she became his wife in 1891. They were married in the Concordia Lutheran Church in Washington, D.C., which is located in Foggy Bottom. It was primarily a church for German-speaking people. And in 1900, he bought their first home, a townhouse also in Foggy Bottom. There were quite a lot of Germans in this community, as well as African Americans. In fact, down the street from their home, one of the earliest historic African American churches resided, St. Mary's, Foggy Bottom. You see, their community was integrated. Many Germans and African Americans became friends. They worked, socialized, prayed together, and their children played with each other in the streets. And most important, they respected each other because they were not threatened, but found enjoyment in their differences and in their company. By this time, the young man had established himself as a painter and interior designer, as his German father was before him. And he was making his way as a citizen, a productive citizen of the United States. So you may be wondering, who is this man? Does anybody have a guess?
Your grandfather.
A little farther back. He was Christian Wilhelm Beilstein, my great-grandfather, the first immigrant to come to the U.S. with my great-grandmother, Maria Cordes, of Spanish descent. They had 3 children. The middle child was Frederick Bernard Beilstein, my grandfather. Fast forward to my father, Frederick Bernard Beilstein Jr., born in 1921 in the United States. He was a citizen, he was born here, and a World War II Navy veteran who fought to rid the world of tyrants and dictators and assure that democracy and freedom would prevail. And then fast forward to me, Joan Elizabeth Beilstein is the way it's pronounced. Having this history, this heritage, what does this make me? What does this make me?
An immigrant. A citizen. Child.
Well, yes, I'm a citizen. Huh?
You're an American.
I'm an American, yes, but what else?
Descended from immigrants.
Yes! Anne gets the cookie today. It makes me a 4th generation of immigrants. Are any of you children of immigrants here? Thank you. You see, back then, the word immigrant was not a dirty word because the United States is a country of immigrants, people who come to our country from another country in hopes of having a better life. As Terry preached last week, these words are engraved on our Statue of Liberty. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless tempest tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. My grandparents, on my father's side, who were born here in the United States, were appalled and outraged by Hitler's invasion of Poland in 1939. They couldn't believe that the European country where our family originated had sunk to such depravity, cruelty, and barbarism, especially toward the Jewish people. From afar, they watched helplessly as Hitler and Nazi Germany tried to erase the Jewish people and their history from the face of Europe. And how did it all start? Recently, a friend sent me a picture of Hitler's rally at Nuremberg Field, which I had visited in 2010. And the caption read, "It didn't start with gas chambers. It started with one party controlling the media, one party controlling the message, one party deciding what is truth, one party censoring and controlling speech and controlling the opposition, one party dividing citizens into us versus them, and calling on their supporters to harass them. It started when good people turned a blind eye and let it happen." Sound familiar? What the world blindly ignored back then with the Nazi reign, and what the good people of our nation are blindly ignoring now, is that history is repeating itself. And sadly, through the centuries, humankind hasn't learned a darn thing. You see, trying to erase a person or a group of people for some self-serving and prejudicial reason is not new. We have Bible stories like today. And through these stories, God is trying to teach us how all this erasing is wrong and not of God. This is what happened to Joseph in our Old Testament reading. What we don't hear, the passages before the one we heard, is that Joseph was Jacob's favorite child, his 11th child, to whom he gave a long coat of many colors. Well, his other 10 brothers were jealous of him, and they decided to erase him. They threw him in a pit to die and told their poor father that Joseph had died, plunging him and his wife Rachel into tremendous grief. Well, trying to erase him didn't work. As it turned out, he lived. And not only did he live, but he became instrumental in saving their lives and the life of their father. He forgave them all, thus doing exactly what Jesus commands us to do in Luke's gospel. Love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who abuse you. I must confess, today's gospel is very hard for me to swallow. When I read it and reflected on it, I said, oh. It's hard for me to swallow, especially when I look at the havoc, confusion, and harm that is being perpetrated by Donald Trump and his administration. And yes, I say his name. Everywhere I look, not only are Democrats being hurt, but so are Republicans, and many who put him back in office. It is hard to turn a blind eye and love, bless, do good to, and pray for those that are trying to erase so many people and so much of our country's history. This is the whole purpose behind purging any and all government agencies which support DEI. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. And now they've added an A to this. Diversity, equity, inclusion, and ability. That's what DEIA represents. Erase any and all knowledge of people who are diverse when it comes to race, ethnicity, citizenship status, sexual orientation, gender identity, physical and mental ability, or disability. Look around this church. This erasure includes many of us who sit in these pews, don't they? Who would consider themselves any of these things? Diversity, equity, inclusion, and ability. And so what I would say, friends, preach it outside of these doors and tell people to read the Gospels, because this is what Jesus was all about. One glaring example of erasure, Donald Trump had the audacity to celebrate Black History Month as his Department of Defense at the same time sent out a news release. Did anybody see this? A news release titled Identity Month's Dead at the Department of Defense. Identity Month's Dead. Well, you know what that means? It means basically that no longer will, at least our government, observe cultural awareness months. Black history, women's history, National Disability Employment Awareness, breast cancer awareness, Asian Pacific American heritage, LGBT pride, Hispanic heritage, and Native American heritage. These will be barred and not included in the months that are named. And so it is hard for me to do what Jesus has asked me to do in terms of loving, doing good to, and praying for the people who are hurting, those I love. Hurting you, my flock, who are federal workers. Hurting you, my flock, because you may be LGBT. Hurting you, maybe like me, you who are an immigrant or a descendant of immigrants. Hurting you, because your skin is not white and you speak another language. And scaring families and children who don't feel safe to go to school, to work, and even to church. Scaring you to the point where maybe you don't want to live anymore. I don't know if you saw the story. It was an 11-year-old girl in Texas who killed herself because she was being bullied at school. Her classmates were taunting her daily, calling her a dirty immigrant, and told her that her parents were going to be deported and that she would be alone, abandoned in this country. How does one forgive the children or the parents who filled their heads with such things which resulted in the death of an innocent life, all because they've chosen to remain ignorant, cruel, and misinformed? How does one forgive those who will influence whole generations of people to come, who will have no idea what it means to respect their neighbor and enjoy their company, the wonderful diversity of people who are wonderfully rich in their heritages? And so in my anger and inability to do as Jesus commands, I turn to one of the greatest prophets of our time, Martin Luther King Jr. And his words have given me hope, have helped me to soldier on. In a sermon written in a Georgia jail and preached just after the bus protest in Montgomery, Alabama, Dr. King said this about loving your enemies. Of course, this is not practical. Life is a matter of getting even, of hitting back, of dog eat dog. My friends, we have followed the so-called practical way for too long a time now, and it has led to deeper confusion and chaos. Time is cluttered with the wreckage of communities which surrender to hatred and violence. For the salvation of our nation and the salvation of humankind, we must follow another way. This does not mean that we abandon our righteous efforts. With every ounce of our energy, we must continue to rid this nation of the incubus of segregation. But we shall not, in the process, relinquish our privilege and our obligation to love. While abhorring segregation, we shall love the segregationalist. This is the only way to create the beloved community. Now, you can easily adapt this powerful quote and apply the wisdom of it to our own day. And so, my friends, I believe God speaks to us and encourages us not to relinquish our privilege, our obligation to follow Jesus' commandment to love. But neither should we abandon our righteous efforts to do as the prophet Micah proclaimed, to love mercy, to do justice, and walk humbly with our God, and to teach and inspire others to do the same. Yes, we may have to pick up the wreckage of our communities, and in some cases our families, which have surrendered to hatred and violence. But one thing is sure, this church, this flock of Christians will stand strong as long as I'm here and shout to the highest heaven, Donald Trump, you and your minions will not erase us. You will not erase us and our rich, wondrous diversity from this country nor from the annals of history. And you know why I can speak that with confidence? because God promises us in all the scriptures that God is always on the side of the oppressed, the marginalized, the underprivileged, the abused, and the powerless. Indeed, God will help rescue, deliver, and be our refuge as long as it takes to once again build, resurrect, and restore God's beloved community in this land. As long as it takes, with us on God's side. Amen.
Amen.
Any online, you want to forward this to the White House, go for it.